Though. Right, so item 2 on our agenda for this morning is our third evidence session with regard to the Building Safety Wales Bill. And I'm very pleased to welcome here, giving evidence before committee this morning, David Wilton, who is Chief Executive Officer for TPAS Cymru, the organisation representing housing tenants in Wales. David, thank you very much for joining us in person. Perhaps I might begin with some general questions before we bring in other committee members. And firstly, in terms of this building safety bill that's proposed by Welsh Government, what is your overall view as to whether this legislation is needed or not?
It's certainly a good bill. We can maybe talk about some tweaks along the way, but tenants have been involved in this right from the start, working with Welsh Government officials. We've run our own sessions called Tenant Voice Cymru to input into the original white paper and into this draft legislation. So overall, yeah, very supportive of it. I would argue for a couple of minutes, but that's what we're here for. But it's yes, a good piece of legislation. It was needed to wrap up that post-Grenfell and move us forward in Wales. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that, David. And Welsh Government's taking or proposing to take a different approach from England. And one aspect of that is to include buildings below 18 metres high in the new regime that's proposed. Is that something that you're supportive of?
Yes, I think England has a different issue. It has big high-rises in big urban cities, and that's right for them. I think Wales has a different type of housing stock, and the type of things we're building now, we look around Cardiff and Swansea, we needed to take a more pragmatic look and look wider than just your classic high-rise towers. Building safety affects a lot more buildings than just your classic high-rise. So, no, I'm very supportive. I think it is the right solution for Wales, and let England do their solution, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you again for that. In England, the building safety... Oh, sorry, Lee, yeah.
So Wales is going beyond where England is going. Given that this is an integrated housing market, just thinking in terms of the knock-on effects this could have on supply and additional regulation in Wales, do you think that's proportionate? You know, are we searching for a problem that?
No, I think building safety is much more than your classic, tragically, the Grenfell scenario. Good building safety also makes things cheaper as well, because you're actually, at the moment, we've got issues with insurance, with buildings, fire risk and things like that. If you've got this bill that actually involves residents and residents there are involved in it, and you'll have better outcome. The property management company charges should be cheaper and stuff like that, because if people are involved, you find it easier. So,
but they have those issues. They have the smaller buildings in England too, and they're not going to be subject
because
to
I think
regulation.
they have literally hundreds, I don't know what the figures for England, but hundreds of high-rises. That's what they've got to tackle first, and that's what society in England wants to tackle, because you can't have another Grenfell. You know, we won't. I think there's been some good work in Wales so far already with cladding and things like that, but they've got such a big problem with their high-rises.
Which we don't have.
No, we don't.
So why are we going looking for problems that they're not?
We're not. We're trying to make buildings safer. So I was in Swansea yesterday in a smaller property, and we were looking at this tenant was like, I'm not sure how to get out of this building, you know, in a fire. That doesn't make it any more, you know, in fact, because of the nature of that one in Bonamine, I think there's more of a risk than some of the high-rises now that have dry risers and the cladding's been taken off and things like that. We need to make buildings safe. And I think it brings trust back to it. We monitor things like... Sorry, I'm going off track.
No, that's fine, David. Carry on.
We monitor things like Reddit and Facebook pages, and especially down the bay, right round here now, there's parents going, my daughter's thinking about moving to Cardiff. Is this building safe? And things like that, which shouldn't be having these conversations. There's a lot of lack of trust, I think, in buildings of multiple occupancy at the moment, and I think this bill will try and bring trust back to that market.
Okay, I'm just testing the arguments here. But so I understand that, but but we are creating a set of extra regulations that's not going to be present in England, which will put us competitively, give us a higher cost base in England. Is the market in a position to bear that?
I think so, because there is a cost in fire safety, but also I think insurers will look much more favourably in Wales now, as 20 miles an hour, things like that. If you look at it, actually, if we create a safer environment, other costs should adjust. Okay. Because we've got too many wake and watches and all sorts of things at the moment on buildings in Wales. I think this will bring more confidence to the market. We're going further in England, yes, but also we'll see better outcomes for residents, and that will reflect in property prices, rental market, the whole thing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. In England, the building safety regulator will have to convene a residents' panel and consult with them on certain matters. The Welsh Government has told this committee that they intend to keep consulting with residents regularly, but they do not feel a statutory duty to consult is needed. I mean, this is something that's, very, very important for TPAS.
Yes,
David, isn't it? So what's your view on what Welsh Government's
It depends
position?
how this shakes out in terms of this. The original proposal was 22 local authorities. I don't think anyone believes that we'll have 22 different authorities all regulating them. My understanding is there'll be about 4 or 5 in Wales. We need to see that detail, I think, before we can understand, do we need a committee? Obviously, I believe in resident engagement, but that doesn't mean to say it needs to be super committees. So England has a big regime there, and they're going to have this regulatory committee with tenants involved in it. Great. I'd like to see the detail. The next phase of this is how these local authorities club together. That's my understanding is what's going to happen. And how they intend to hear the resident voice.
So you'd want to see what
I think I'd like to see it at those regional levels. I don't think we need to have a super committee, just for the sake of it. I think it's a little early at the moment until we see what happens. I don't think there's going to be 22 committees. 22 licensed authorities. It'll be inefficient.
Go on. Yeah.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
So do you think the bill should not say that and should actually set the expectation of a smaller number of regional bodies?
Yeah, my concern has always been about the 22. I was never in favour of that because, firstly, you've got places, and it's more and say, who don't have that type of buildings, category 1s and things like that. I haven't seen all the data on it, but I know there's places in Wales that don't have cat 1 buildings. So you're going to need to see some sort of concentration. I don't think it needs to be in line. We tested some tenants, and they talked about it being in line with the fire authorities, which is one thing, but that's only 3.
So do you think the bill should say that we should do this on a regional basis?
Yes, it would be much more. What that is, whether that's 3, 5, 6, I don't know enough. I think it has to reflect the 3, but something like the South Wales one is so big, you might want to chop that one up. And also,
we are creating corporate joint committees for other issues.
Yeah.
Would it not make sense to reflect that structure?
I think it's got to reflect the fire one. That's the key. But under that, I think there's going to be a certain numbers. Cardiff's probably in its own right, but it could take on, say, Vale of Morgan or something like that. I think there's got to be some practicalities. But the local government people, I think, can work that out between them, unless you see a need in the bill to find that. There's going to be some practicalities, like North Wales. It's a big region, but equally it doesn't have the high rises. Yeah.
Leslie?
Yeah, just come back. I'm probably a bit more cynical. I think you could end up with 22 different.
Really? Yeah.
Absolutely.
That's where local government reform's been there before, isn't it? Yeah.
So, just picking up on what Lee has said, do you not think it should actually specify in the bill?
I think, as we're having this conversation, it does make sense that we need to narrow that down. 22 would be inefficient, and I think it would be, so yes.
But you wouldn't want to recommend a particular number?
No. I think there's certain practicalities. The classic is what you do with Powys. The start of bracket, and you're suddenly in North Wales, aren't you? It's where does that fall? And there's better people to work that one out. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. David, is there anything else you'd want to say about, what Welsh Government ought to do to make sure that residents play a role in shaping the legislation and the guidance, you know, is there anything in particular you'd like to see?
The residents have been involved so far. I'd say we've done a lot of work. I think the next phase now, the bit that concerns me is this resident engagement plans they've all got to produce, the building owners. It doesn't actually say you've got to engage residents in the first place to develop your plan. You literally can just write your resident engagement plan and it just says communicate. Doesn't actually define what communicate is either. I think after Grenfell there was that feedback and campaign for involving residents. And so the tweak I'd like to see on that resident engagement plans is the residents are actually involved in shaping the plan in the first place, rather than just, here it is. And I think that's a minor tweak, but it would make a difference, I think, to the effectiveness of the resident engagement plans.
Yeah. Okay, David, thanks for that. Lee Waters.
Thanks. Just on the theme of residents, the bill currently does not take into account the vulnerability of residents.
Yes.
It makes its assessment on the buildings, not on the people in them.
Yeah.
Do you think that is the correct approach?
No, I understand there was an element of how, as legislation, you know, how much can you get in one thing before the end of this term? I was disappointed. I think there was a lot of things around vulnerable people, evacuation plans, people with disabilities. I think there was some detail, I have to check somewhere, it talked about they want to come back to it.
Yes.
But again, it goes back to how much do you get into one bill. But it comes across, we had a lot of tenants in our sessions talk about PEEPs and evacuation plans and things like that, and wanting more confidence that that was taken into account in that building safety evacuation. But whether you get into this or whether it needs a separate piece looking at.
So do you think in terms of the way the categories are drawn, the vulnerability of the people in them should be taken into account when making those categorizations?
It's a difficult, because a safe building is a safe building if you get it right. So you can have more vulnerable people in a building if they're more inclined for a fire risk, I think that's going to affect any type of building. So no, I don't. I think evacuation plans is a different thing to the allocations.
So you're broadly content with the government's approach
yes,
to the bill?
But the evacuation needs to be solved. If it's not this bill, somebody's got to do some work on it.
Okay, and similarly in terms of remediation of existing risks, because again, that's not covered. The bill doesn't do anything to help buildings currently in a poor state. Yeah. Do you think the bill has got the right balance struck on that?
The argument was that there was already work, and the remediation was, it's a separate piece of work. And
what's your view?
My view, I don't see the point of having it. It needed to be two pieces, I think, because the remediation, the thing we've been quite annoyed about, and it's a different piece of work, is the fact is developers are still developing without remediating their existing buildings. And tenants keep saying that. How are you allowing these people to build when they haven't fixed their existing buildings? It comes over and over. I'm not sure that would be in this bill for that, but I think somebody needs to stop some of those developers from carrying on using public land, public subsidies, and not fixing their buildings.
But in terms of this bill, you think the balance is right?
The danger is, would I have liked to seen it? Yes. But the danger is making a super bill, isn't it? With everything in it.
Well, with respect, we're trying to scrutinise this bill.
Yeah.
And then make recommendations to the government on whether this bill should be changed or not. So, what do you think should happen with this bill?
At this stage, I think it'd be a challenge to put all that in.
Well, that's the government's problem.
Yeah,
we're here to provide scrutiny to the bill.
Yeah.
Do you think this bill
If
gets
it
the
could be
balance
done,
right?
I think something around the remediation and enforcement should be there, if I was able to do that.
So you don't think, as currently drafted, the bill gets the balance right?
Yes, yeah. I think there's a lot of things in life you could put into these things. Yeah.
So I'm not clear.
No.
Is the bill as currently drafted right, or do you think it should be changed?
There are things I would change in it, yes. Yes, and that's one of them.
Specifically on remediation?
I think there could have been tougher penalties, yes,
Okay.
to stop.
Lee, just before you
Sure.
continue, Shan.
I was just going to pursue the same questioning, really, because last week we had stark evidence that the remediation just isn't happening, and that, you know, there's a feeling that stronger sanctions are needed for the developers.
And tenants have said that over and over again.
But, you know, we need legislation to do that, and doesn't this present an opportunity for, because okay, when we started on this, maybe there was kind of hope that the remediation would have happened, but it's not happening.
No,
so is there an opportunity in this legislation now to actually, you know, put the enforcement and the remediation, because it's been so slow?
Yes. I don't see it in here. I don't see it in here, no. Yeah.
All right, then.
Yeah, and I just wanted to finish, just to give Gain for the record, to check that you are happy with the 3 categories of building based on height and number of stories.
Yeah.
You do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's practical based on Wales. Yeah.
Okay, diolch yn fawr. Peter Fox.
Hey.
Just talking about residents a bit now, do you think that the bill achieves the right balance between residents' rights and their responsibilities? Because we know that, you know, the parts in the bill which are sort of prohibiting residents from doing certain things. Is the balance right?
I can answer 2 parts. I think personally the bill it is balanced. What happens in the tenant sessions, though? The tenants expressing concerns of, remember in America they talk about HOAs or something, you know, and given citations and things like that. There was concern from some tenants that building managers and things like that could use this part of the bill to almost maliciously is not the right word, but over punish tenants for, you could have just left your bike outside your apartment whilst you're getting something in the thing, citation. It's that American culture, you know, HOAs. I'm not saying I agree with it, but that's something, as tenants, they've brought up in the sessions. Yeah, no, thanks for that. Do you think then, is there sufficient support in place for residents, especially those who might have, you know, extra responsibilities? Does it need more support put in place? Will they have enough? This is new territory for, I think, especially the private sector buildings, in terms of resident engagement, things like that. I've got concerns how they're going to do that. We would like to support them because we've been doing this in social housing for years. As it, you know, how do you make sure you communicate into different diverse communities, how you're communicating to residents and leaseholders. That's another key point, is the original stuff always talked about leaseholder engagement. They may not be the people living in the building. It does now talk more about residents, and that's been an amendment that's happened in its evolution. But resident engagement and leaseholder engagement are 2 separate things, so they may not be the same people. No, absolutely. Do you think the bill then has the appropriate level of transparency of building safety information? No. So it talks about a fire certificate, fine, but actually in a prominent place. But I think there's more about what is the complaints process, the authorised, you know, in terms of the authorised person. There's a lot more needs to be done on that, because as it stands at the moment, the responsible person is just a named corporation or limited company. And the tenant session, I know I'm jumping ahead a little bit, Chair, but the tenants didn't like the fact it was just a limited company, because it could just be Shell Corp 2020 or something like that. They wanted a name above the door, a bit like a licensee or something. Who is the person responsible? And that should be in the transparency sections. They might still work for Faceless Corp, whatever, but it's about having a named person above the door. And that came up over and over in tenant sessions. No, that's helpful. That's a strong message there. And then, Chair, just last from me, really. Did you want to come in?
I can come in straight away.
Oh, come on in, John.
Yeah, it's just about a question about that accountable person. Has there been much information about what that would entail? Because you mentioned that it could be sort of like a corporate body, or it could just be an individual who lives in the flat itself. Has there been much direction from the Welsh Government there about how that accountable person would be appointed? How would they be trained to do the role?
How I read it is that it's a body is the accountable person. So, and there is responsibilities for that body in there, and they do have to have certain training and things like that. That's fine. But the tenants themselves are like, that's just, it's a faceless corp, you know, address care of fancylawyers.com or something. It doesn't mean anything. It needs a name. You know, somebody's got their name above the door, like a licensee. I'd very much love to see that as an amendment, that somebody has to be named within that person, within that body.
Yeah, I can see that, David. That's a strong point, because you know, the bill requires those accountable persons to put systems in place for the handling of residents' complaints. So, you know, they've got to be known, they've got to be seen to be accountable.
They're still an employee of Faceless Corp, but they're still a name. Yeah.
So I think you've been pretty clear on there, actually. So that whole transparency bit needs to be bolstered and strengthened, certainly around the identity of the accountable persons, and the systems they're going to need to put in place. So I think
we're seeing an evolution as well of things like building passports.
Yeah.
So because there's other issues, electrical safety and other things in social housing, building passports allow you to see certain things, fire risk, damp assessments, all sorts of things. And they can be set at different levels for the resident to see. The leaseholder could maybe have more about the breakdown of things, of service charges, things like that, because they pay that. That's where I'd like to see the next phase.
Do you foresee tensions where you might have a building of, you know, with several private tenants in there, and trying to determine who is the accountable person, or there might be perhaps
it's still the building owner.
Yes, you know, I mean, but there could be 4 or 3 independent owners and 1 tenant.
Yes.
You know, I think there's a lack of clarity in my mind about how accountable people will be put in place and manage that.
And that's the bit, again, it just says that the fire safety certificates and stuff should be prominently positioned, you know, in a hallway or something. Actually, it needs to be the details of the accountable person. Yeah. It needs to have the complaints processes, the resident engagement plan. You know, we see things now developing like QR codes and things like that to be able to access things. That's how social housing's gone, you know. And I think we're playing a big catch-up in the private resident. I know it's getting the balance right with costs and stuff like that, and social housing is a different relationship, but I think this is a little bit limited on some of the transparency.
Yeah. Because there might be one tenant in a block of owned, so the owner of that premises would be the accountable person in that regard. There's a lot of unanswered questions, I think, around a lot of that.
And different engagement, as I say, there's going to need to be a leaseholder engagement and resident engagement as part of those development plans.
David, in terms of building passports, they're in use at the current time then, are they?
Sorry?
Building passports, as you described, they're used at the current time then, are they?
Yes, they're developing. It's a newer process, but it allows like a document library, and it can be tiered for different levels. It's been kicking around for a while in different countries, in the private sector. I think we're going to have to go there in time, because whether it's social housing, private rental, private sector, certain documents need to be shown or be made available. Insurance certificates. Has my building owner got a valid insurance certificate? I can see it in the passport. Some people won't want to access it. That's their right. But some people, you know, need to know that we want to see the fire risk assessment, things like that. Dame Judith Hackett was really critical after Grenfell, where she heard about tenants having to put in FOIs to see certain information, that the buildings they were living in and couldn't see the fire risk assessments, things like that. That's not a good place. And I think some of this will come out of this bill, but I think there's further in terms of passports.
Would you like to see that sort of building passport approach in this bill? Or?
Yeah, I hadn't really thought about it. It goes back to how much can you get into, but I think it's the way we're going to have to go anyway. So whether it's this bill or a future housing bill, passports. We've done it with tenants, and they quite like the idea. They accept, it's not about seeing everything. But social housing's got a challenge at the moment with electrical certificates. Some of you might be familiar with it. That may have been a place where some of those things could have been filed easier than sending out reams of paper, and people don't read, you know.
No. Lee Ward.
So I just want to test this idea of where the threshold lies between what is a reasonable level of regulation and what
Absolutely.
is an unreasonable level. Because you mentioned you'd ideally like to see a named tenant have a series of...
Named building...
an accountable person, sure.
Accountable person.
So in a smaller block of flats, that would be a tenant, presumably.
No, it would be the management company, probably.
Okay. Well, sometimes the management company is the
Yes,
tenant.
true, yeah.
So, you know, at what point on these three categories we have, do you think that should apply to all categories?
No,
Or should there be some kind of...
It's a good question. Good
cut-off?
question.
And
No,
what
that's
should that
valid.
cut-off
That's
be?
valid. I don't think anyone would argue against, in a Category 1 building, you need a named person who is qualified and is the accountable person. I accept that in a block of 4 or something, you've got your directors who are managing the building between them.
Yes.
Good point. Do we need then a named person if it's just between the 4 of them? No, maybe. It's something we could test with people, but I imagine people would be more, the tenants would be more reasonable or understanding of something like that, because...
Well, we're scrutinising a piece of legislation here, and you're making an argument for amending it. We'd be slightly less casual about where we apply these things and where we don't
But it's a
apply
good
them.
question about, well, that's the point of Category 1, 2 and 3.
Yes.
Not everything applies in this bill to Category 2 and 3, because it's not appropriate.
Yes.
And I think, I accept what you're saying, it's about appropriateness. I would say you would need it in the 1s and 2s. I don't know, I'd have to think about that on the 3s. But, yeah, that's right.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you could take with that, Peter? Yeah. Sian? Sian
Yeah,
Gwynfi, yeah.
diolch. Da ni...
Thank you. We have touched a little on this already with regards to new rights for people who need support to self-evacuate immediately. So the white paper included those proposals, and you said earlier on that you felt that perhaps we needed to consider these aspects. And so do you believe that this bill now, which follows a different path to the white paper, does it need to do more with regard to those residents that need additional support to evacuate a building? Is that something that would happen in this bill, or?
Put that in our response, that some people call it PEEPs, it's not technically PEEPs, but the evacuation plans, it was something the tenants, a number of them, because a number of people who came to our sessions had disabilities. They're the ones who had the most concerns. You know, they were the ones who, is it stay put? Is it how's going to get me out of this building? And that was one of the issues with Grenfell. You know, people being trapped there, unable, being told whether to stay put and things like that. So, yes, I think I've said already, I'd have liked to have seen more around that. I don't know if that was convenience, time, or whether it needs a separate piece of work. But I would have liked to have seen something more on that. And I think I've put that in a response.
Yeah,
because it states in the bill that it requires duty holders, or accountable people rather, to be able to put in place things so that people can evacuate. But you want something stronger than that, perhaps, in the bill. How would that look? How would something stronger than that look?
It goes back to rights and under the bill, and for the regulatory authority, or whatever that turns out to be able to enforce that on the regulations so that they can see how they're doing it, what they're doing it, and it involves then the fire and rescue service, the local authority. It needs a joined up approach. This is not on just a management company. It's a much more grown up approach needed. How do I see it happening? That's it, I think, by...
So
yeah.
the bill needs to be more specific in terms of
On that,
involving the
yes.
other agencies and
yes.
having a plan, a proper
Yes.
plan, not just leaving it up to
Because a bill...
the company.
Yeah, the property management company, or however it is, they're not necessarily the people to decide on the best evacuation process. It's got to be involved.
Yeah, that's quite clear, thank you. And da ni 'di siarad am yr...
And we've already discussed the strategy for residents' engagement. So do you feel that residents need to be a part of creating that strategy as well as this being created, and that perhaps needs to be put in the bill as well? And would that be for Category 1 buildings? What about 2 and 3?
The main responsibility is on category 1, and it has to be. Fortunately, we don't have lots of them, but it's still, the category 1 needs that resident engagement, and it needs to be co-produced. It needs much more residents involved in development strategy in the first place. And I think that's what I've put in my evidence and came from the tenants, you know. Don't just tell us, involve us, you know. I've got an example, if you're interested. I heard last week from the northeast of England where they had issues with fire doors being wedged open, things like that, people drilling through. By residents, they took them and showed them to a fire door factory and showed the difference of when doors are propped open or you've compromised the door with a spy hole and things like that. The tenants were like, wow, you know, and it totally changed. It's that engagement can change positive behaviour. And that's where I'd argue, although it's regulation, it might actually deliver more positive outcomes, which is, you know, safer buildings, safer insurance, things like that, when you have good resident engagement. I understand your concerns, but I think the positives of good resident engagement and being involved actually might bring management charges down, it might bring insurances down, things like that.
Senedd,
And moving on to a different area, which is the costs. Do you believe that the bill is strong enough to avoid passing on excessive costs for conforming with these new safety measures onto residents?
Truthfully, it's not my area of expertise because we're not quite clear how it's going to work or in practice afterwards. Are we going to have 22 authorities? Are we going to have 1 or 2? At one point I was in a conversation with someone said, because in Rent Smart Wales, we managed, Cardiff then was the host and everyone else then contributes to it. Until we see how that is, there is going to be cost to that. Local authorities bear costs on it, all sorts of stuff, don't they, as part of their duties. I'm not 100% clear how the local authorities are going to recover those costs and how they're going to pass it on. Truthfully, it's not my area of expertise. It's resident voice I've been more concerned with.
yeah, well, I'm thinking about the actual installing of new measures.
Yeah.
And then how do we avoid that those costs don't kind of seep through and become part of management fees, etc.
So one of the things I'd love to be...
Is the bill able to sort of, are we able to do something in the bill to avoid that kind of situation? Thinking that there's also other legislation in the offing, isn't there? There's the leasehold reform stuff, which will make it more transparent if Wales brings new legislation in, according to what's going on in the UK. So is there anything in this bill that we can actually pinpoint, you know, make sure that the costs don't accrue to the tenants?
I don't know at the moment, truthfully. I think it goes back to that, how many authorities we have. There are certainly ways we can help these new legislation. I know my organisation, we work with all the local authorities in Wales. We would want to support them. We've learned a lot about resident engagement, tenant engagement. That's literally what we do. So how can we help these building managers do resident engagement? It's got to be something we'd want to be working with and helping them, because we also want to install best practice. We want to give templates and things like that rather than everyone reinventing the wheel and increasing costs. But in terms of the fire safety costs and things, it's not my area of expertise as how that's going to work.
Can I just bring in Leslie a moment, Sharon? Leslie?
I was just going to pick up on that point, actually, that Sean raised with you around tenant participation. For me, it's a no-brainer in any walk of life. You know, if you can engage the people who are going to be affected the most. And you also said that it could, or it might, I think was the word you used, bring insurance down. And again, maybe this isn't the piece of legislation to make sure that tenant participation is improved, but have you any evidence to show that that could happen? Because money talks, doesn't it?
No, true.
You know, that,
yes.
that could be a very important thing.
Well, I worked in financial services many years before I saw the light. It's about risk, isn't it? And buildings that have good resident engagement and residents following that resident, you know, so fire certificates are coming back clean. You know, residents are on board. It has to affect risk, doesn't it? And I haven't got the evidence that that's going to work, but we know, we've seen it from other sectors, other projects, that in time you will see improvements, because it went through the roof afterwards. Wake and watches, you know, the insurers didn't have full trust that those wake and watch people were actually awake and things like that. You know, it was, we need to bring those insurances down. That's what drove up service charges that probably your members, you know, your constituents contact you about service charges. It's how we bring service charges back down. The only way to do that, yes, there'll be more work for the property management, but we need to bring back down that insurance.
Sian, are you content? You are? Okay, Leslie, would you like to continue then?
We've heard your views already around accountable a person, and certainly the evidence you gave us was very specific. Is there anything else you want to say? I thought the idea of having a name above the door, like licensed premises, is, you know, very straightforward, and everybody would understand that. I was just wondering if there's anything else you wanted to say about the principal accountable person that this bill obviously creates.
No, I think it goes back to now seeing how it pans out in practice if this goes through, and working with those accountable people. You know, like I say, I want to see them involving the tenants, the residents, sorry, the leaseholders. No, I don't think there's much more to say on that.
Okay. You've also referred to Category 1 and 2 buildings. You definitely agree with them being registered. And do you agree with the Welsh Government, as is proposed in the bill now, that Category 3 buildings won't be? Are you content with that?
Yeah, they're a different level. You know, we're talking smaller buildings, more local arrangements. It doesn't need to have, you know, thick documents and engagement plans and stuff like that.
So you agree it's a proportionate approach?
For the moment, yeah. And I think it goes back to evidence. Let's see what happens about that. If in time we're seeing that there's still issues and things like that, maybe that's something. But I don't see the point of adding it in at the moment, because, as I say, we've got to see how this pans out and fix the worst things first. Yeah.
Okay, Leslie. And Joel.
Oh, thank you, Chair. It was just the one question for me, really. You mentioned earlier briefly about sort of like the Hackett review. Obviously, one of the recommendations there was a building safety regulator, which they're looking to bring in England, but with this bill, it doesn't propose to do that. And it looks at then maybe the local authorities or authority services taking on that role. And I know from your written evidence, tenants have expressed concern whether or not local authorities will have the resources to do that. And I just wanted to get your views on that. Is that the right way forward?
It isn't how I would have done it. It feels that we're lumping more things on local authorities. Equally, they know their area. They do know their patches. They've done a lot of working with fire and rescue services. Is one authority, I mean, like Rent Smart Wales worked, but, is still evolving, but it's been a success. I'm behind the idea of regions. I think I've already made it clear already, I don't know what those regions are. There are people who need, probably cleverer people to work that out. But I do see how, it goes back to, I think we're going to see different interpretations, and that slightly worries me. So where is the one person, you know, is that Welsh Government overseeing those things? Or are we just leaving it to the local authorities to interpret this? Is it Order Wales? Is it, you know, how do you scrutinise these new authorities, whatever they are?
Obviously, you mentioned that obviously the Welsh Government is looking to go above and beyond what they're doing in England with this legislation. And I just want to just pick your brains again. Is there anything that's happening in the rest of the UK that you think, well, actually, this could be included within this?
Not in this. The remediation was much different in other places. Certainly Scotland and parts of England took a more aggressive stance. On this part, I think it's sensible, and I think I've said already, I think it's appropriate for Wales. I don't think we have different challenges and different types of builds. The things we're building, we're not building the size that England has in city centres and stuff, the sky rises.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Joel. David, is there anything else at all that you'd like to mention or bring to the attention of?
No, I think that's it. Because I don't want to really repeat anything I've already put in evidence, because you've already got that, I think. Like I say, I've been supportive of this, and tenants have been supportive of it, but I think there's little bits we could improve on it, and we'll see how it goes through.
Okay. David, that's great. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming in to give evidence to committee this morning. You will be sent a transcript to check for factual accuracy. Diolch yn fawr.
Cheers. Thanks. Thanks.